This kit you have just seen depicts a case of utilitarianism. The two most famous philosophers who contributed to this ethical framework were Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Utilitarianism, a form of consequentialism, generally judges an action to be morally right if it brings good or happiness for the majority. Variations of utilitarianism have sprouted as a result of its limitation. Though it may seem that judging an action using utilitarianism is simple, it must consider three things. What things are good and bad? For whose good? And whether the actions are made right or wrong by their actual consequences or foreseeable consequences. Going back to the skit, the CEO was faced with a dilemma of choosing whether he should lay off his employees or not. First, in analyzing what is good and bad, this scenario shows that deciding which is not so clear-cut. Laying off workers would harm those employees and their families as they would lose their job, which is important especially during this pandemic. On the other hand, keeping the employees would keep their salaries expenses, which might do more harm to the company, and eventually to everyone working for it if the company were to shut down due to continuous losses. Second, for whose good is affected? On one end are the employees directly affected by a layoff should that had been chosen, and on the other end is the company as a whole if the company were to suffer from bankruptcy in the future. Lastly, the actual consequences of the action would be the loss of jobs of the employees, while the foreseeable consequences would be the potential bankruptcy of the company in the future. There are two forms of utilitarianism: act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. Rule utilitarianism judges the effects of types of action such as killing and stealing. Act utilitarianism, which this kit shows, judges an act individually. Act utilitarianism takes into account the context in which the decision is made. It argues that the same type of act must be judged differently depending on the context. To conclude, the CEO's decision to keep the employees was made considering the context of the pandemic. He did not want the employees and their families to suffer from the loss of work. He based his decision on the actual consequence and not the foreseeable consequence, which has no certainty of happening.